What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another UFC breakdown and predictions video, this time for episode 4 of the Contender Series. For episode 3, we ended up sweeping the card, going 5-0 on picks, and we picked the only underdog to get it done as well in Andre Puliev in the main event. So I'm super excited. I'm hoping we can replicate that success here for episode 4. Now, there was a cancellation for one of the bouts. Austin Bashi versus Tommy McMillan was canceled because of an injury on the McMillan side. It forced him to withdraw from the fight on Tuesday, but the UFC has already found a replacement in Ramos, which we already ended up watching some fight tape, breaking down that matchup as well. So by the time you guys are seeing this, it is going to be Saturday or Sunday, Monday, whenever you get around to this video, but I am recording this on Friday. So as of right now, Ramos is the replacement. It's going to be interesting to see how he does for the weigh-ins and blah, 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 but we will get to that matchup later on in this video. Make sure you hit that like button, drop a subscription to the channel if you are new, and drop a comment down below on your thoughts for episode 4 and any of the particular matchups. Let's get into these breakdowns. First up, we have Keelan Salkilld going up against Gage Young. Now, some people pronounce it Quillen. That may be how you pronounce it. I'm not 100% sure. We will find out on Tuesday. But when I hear Quillen, it reminds me of a child that hasn't figured out how to pronounce things properly yet and is trying to say Krillin from Dragon Ball Z, like Quillen. So I'm going to call him Keelan for now. We'll see on Tuesday. Regardless, Salkilld, fantastic fighter with phenomenal skill set. I was impressed with the tape that I was able to find on him. And to be honest, both of these guys, basically all of their fights are accessible on UFC Fight Pass and YouTube. So I got a good idea of how these fighters are. Now, for Salkilld, like I mentioned, fantastic fighter with a phenomenal skill set. He's got great hands, he mixes kicks in well, and he has awesome combinations on the feet. His go-to is grappling, though. He has fantastic grappling as well. He has a great ability to reverse positions and has a submission threat also. The best way I can explain Salkilld is he is a cerebral fighter. He has this ability to stay safe in bad positions, and it seems like no matter where the fight takes place, he knows exactly what he wants to do in those situations. One knock on him, though, is he is susceptible to takedowns, and sometimes he can spend some time on his back fishing for those submissions. Now, on the Gage Young side, he's a strong guy. He has a kickboxing background, but he has a wrestling style in MMA. He has the ability to work his opponents to the mat and has great top control once he gets them down there. He has real power on the feet, especially in that right hand, and he loves to throw kicks up the middle with teeps to the body, to the head, front kicks. Now, a knock on the Gage Young side is on multiple occasions in his pro MMA career, he's been caught in submissions plenty of times. Now, he has worked out of most of them, but his only recorded loss is a submission. So that is something to keep in mind, considering Salkilld has that great grappling ability. Now, I believe Salkilld is the more refined fighter in this matchup. The only thing that worries me is the wrestling from Young. Like we mentioned, Salkilld can be taken down, and sometimes he does spend a little too much time on his back fishing for those submissions, but he does have a real submission threat. And like we mentioned, Gage Young has found himself in some bad submission spots throughout his career, and if you find yourself in those positions with Salkilld, there's a good chance you're getting submitted. Now, I think that Salkilld, if he keeps the range, stays off of the fence, he should be able to avoid these takedowns and get this done. I will say, though, Gage Young has a great ability to get the fight to the ground, so he probably will find a few takedowns in this matchup, but once he's down there, I think Salkilld is going to find that submission, and that will be my prediction for this fight. Keelan Salkilld to get the submission win over Gage Young. Let's keep rolling. The second fight of the night, we have a women's flyweight bout. Eunice Duben up against Shannon Clark. Now, for Duben, she seems physically imposing. She's a decent striker who mixes in attacks well, but they're not technical at all. I believe she has a grappling background as well. The only problem is I can't find much on Duben other than her most recent fight back in April of 2024, where she fought a pro debuter who honestly did not look like she's a fighter. maybe she can develop her skills throughout her career. Like I said, it was her pro debut, but she really didn't look like she belonged in that cage. The rest of her career is 4 fights that all took place back in 2019, and every single one of those fighters were also making their debuts, as you can see in the last 5 records she has there on the graphic. Now, on the Shannon Clark side, she is an absolute dog. She grinds nonstop. She's absolutely relentless and has this ability to make fights dirty. She also has amazing cardio to sustain that high pace for 15 minutes or more and is extremely active the entire fight. She does do her best work in the clinch, though. Her open match striking is worrisome. She is hittable, but she does a great job pushing her opponent back up against defense and attacking the head and ripping big body shots to her opponents as well. She is hittable because of that sloppy open match striking, but she's strong enough to get the fight where she wants in that clinch. Now, this is tricky because of the unknowns on the Duben side, but I am going to be going with Shannon Clark here. She's tenacious. She's a dog. She's constantly looking to inflict damage on her opponent, and she is go, go, go and never stops. I think she's going to overwhelm Duben with the constant pressure and high volume in this fight, and I think she's going to be able to find a finish in the late second round or even the third by overwhelming Duben and just exhausting her out of this match. I know it's a little crazy to predict finishes in women's MMA, but I do believe this will be more of a volume-based exhaustion sort of finish on the Shannon Clark side. So I will take the Canadian to get things done. Let's move on to the next fight, which is that short notice replacement that we were talking about in the intro of the video. Austin Bashi is now going to be taking on Dorian Ramos, and honestly, I like this better for Bashi. I already had broken down and watched tape on both Bashi and Tommy McMillan, and I was going to be picking Tommy McMillan in this fight, in this matchup, but I think this is going to be an easier match for Bashi, and let me explain why. So, on the Austin Bashi side, he is a wrestler. He has quick strikes and doesn't look lost on the feet, but plan A is to wrestle. He's a strong guy. He will shoot blast doubles, force his opponent to the cage, and drag them to the ground. His takedown attempts are beautifully timed, explosive, and are not telegraphed, so it's hard for opponents to kind of tag him on the way in. And his wrestling pressure is just relentless. If he can't get it the first time, he's going to continue diving for legs and eventually will work to get that takedown. Once he gets the opponent down to the mat, he has great control and he's always looking for ground and pound opportunities. He has fantastic cardio as well. He can keep that pressure for the entire fight. He knows what he wants to do and he implements his game plan every time he steps into that cage, and no opponent out of the 12 that he's fought in his career have been able to stop him. He is undefeated at 12-0, which is very impressive at the age of 22. Now, on the Ramos side, I did watch some tape on him. There's a few of his fights on Fight Pass, and I believe I watched one on YouTube as well. He honestly has a similar game plan to Bashi. He also has the same pressure. He wants to get the fight to the ground, and he wants to put in work from that top position. Now, the only thing is he's not nearly as good as Bashi is with that style. If he isn't able to get his opponents to the ground, though, he is content with pushing them up against the cage and putting in work in the clinch. Now, his striking is mediocre, and although he does have decent volume, he throws sloppy at times, and that allows his opponents to land some nice shots on him. He does not have the good enough cardio to sustain that kind of pressure that Bashi does. Now, I think that Bashi is literally just a younger and better version of Ramos. Not to mention the fact that Ramos is now taking this on extremely short notice, so the cardio that we were speaking about just now that situation isn't going to help him here on short notice. I do also prefer the striking of Bashi over Ramos. He's more precise and he has more sting in his shots. I believe he'll be able to dictate the fight, dictate where the fight goes, and he should honestly be able to get this done. I think this is an easier matchup for him than the Tommy McMillan fight, and that's basically it. I think Bashi is just a better, younger version than Ramos. And if anybody's going to be able to implement that high pressure wrestling game plan, it's going to be on the Bashi side. I can actually see him getting a finish as well. Probably, maybe not in the first, maybe second or third round. But I really like the Bashi side this time in this matchup. Let's keep rolling to the co-main event. We got, I don't know why I didn't fix this picture here, but we got Will Currie on the one side taking on Jordan Santos. Now Will Currie is one of those Cage Warriors guys. He's a 12-3 record, but 2 of those 3 losses are to Christian Leroy Duncan in Cage Warriors. And we know, even though Leroy Duncan was just beat up by RoboCop at UFC 304, Christian Leroy Duncan is a tough fight for a lot of people, and that was when Will Currie was a really young man, probably like 21 or 22 years old. So we can give him kind of a pass in that sense. But Currie, solid overall skill set. He does some of his best work on the ground, though, and he has a great scrambling game. He does not accept bad positions. He constantly works to get out of them, and he is great at finding the back of his opponents. Now, he has a kick-friendly striking style. He mixes in those kicks at all 3 levels, and he has awesome cardio. In his most recent loss, it was a title fight back at Cage Warriors where he kept a high grappling pace for the entire 5 rounds. And even though he lost that fight, it was a 48-47 unanimous decision. And like I said, he was able to keep up for the entire 25 minutes and didn't look tired anytime during that fight. Now, on the Santos side, he has a decent overall skill set, but honestly, it's hard to tell how good he really is because of his level of competition. If you check out that last 5 record that he has here, he hasn't really fought the best. 8-2 is probably his most impressive win, but then 3-0, 6-13, 1-4, and then his loss 5 fights ago, 13-9. He does have solid forward pressure, and he uses feints very well on the feet. He has a fantastic sprawl so he can defend those takedowns in the open mat, but he struggles to stay on his feet when he's getting pressured up against the cage. Now, this is a tricky one to decide on for a few reasons. And they're on the Santos side, actually. So Santos hasn't fought in almost 2 years. So that win that you see there, the 8-2, was back in November of 2022. Also, it's hard to gauge where he is at in terms of skill, because if you watch some tape on Santos, I ended up watching, I believe it was the 6-13 opponent to the 8-2 opponent. So there was only one fight in between there with that 3-0. But the 6-13 opponent that he fought, from that to the 8-2, he looks like a completely different fighter. His physique coming into his most recent fight did not even look like the same guy. His skill level looked exponentially better. And if he comes in with that kind of an improvement from those 2 fights or this 2-year layoff now to this fight with Will Currie, it's going to be kind of tough. I'm assuming that Currie is going to be a sizable favorite here, but I honestly see Santos giving him a little bit of resistance. I'm still going to pick Currie in this matchup because I believe he's just the better fighter, and Santos struggles in the areas that Currie excels. So I can see Currie throwing out some kicks, backing Santos up against the cage, and eventually dragging him down to the mat to put in the best work that he typically does in those fights. So I will take Will Currie in the co-main event. Let's move on to the main event of the evening, which is the trickiest one because of lack of fight tape. We have Igor Cavalcanti going up against Seok Hyun Ko. This was really difficult for me because I was only able to find like 1 or 2 fights from the Ko side, but Cavalcanti, I honestly barely found anything. Maybe just some clips or glimpses of what he can actually do. And this is what I gathered from both of these fighters. On the Cavalcanti side, he's powerful, explosive. He has a BJJ background with slick grappling. Now for Hyun Ko, he's a striker with that wide sideways stance. He has a solid jab and powerful leg kicks. That's basically all I have. This is a very tricky fight to pick because of that lack of fight tape that I mentioned. But I am going to go with Cavalcanti here. Even though Cole may be slightly more technical on the feet, he's been KO'd twice, and a fighter like Cavalcanti has enough power to make it 3 KO losses on Cole's career. Cavalcanti also has more ways to get it done. He can get this done on the feet. If it gets to the ground, he has that jiu-jitsu game that can get Cole in trouble with some submissions. A big question mark amongst all of them, though, is the cardio of these fighters, especially Cavalcanti, because Cavalcanti is one of those fighters that finishes all of his opponents in that first round. He has a 9-0 record, and every single fight he's had in his pro MMA career, he's finished in the first round. So how is he going to look in the second? How is he going to look in the third? We're not sure. Hopefully he doesn't even get there because we're picking Cavalcanti. Now on the Co side, it's hard to gauge how good he really is because his last 3 opponents, his most recent was a 40-plus-year-old fighter who was 7-7. The fight before that was a 50-something-year-old fighter who, as you see, was 28, 27, and 6. And then the third fighter here, 5-4, he was 5-4, and then he retired after that fight. So it's really hard to gauge how good either of these guys are because we have such little tape to go off of. But I am going to go with Cavalcanti, probably to get the KO. That's going to be my prediction here. But guys, in terms of confidence for these matchups, beyond the Austin Bashi fight, I am really not confident in many of these fights. Actually, I am confident in the Shannon Clark side as well, despite the lack of fights that we got to see on the Duben side and a lot of the unknowns. But in terms of last week's card where we swept, the confidence level is like, the difference is like night and day for me. I'm not too confident in most of these picks. Like I said, my most confident probably going to be Shannon Clark and Austin Bashi here. But in the opening fight, we have Salkilld, Shannon Clark to get it done, Austin Bashi, Will Currie, and Igor Cavalcanti. Those are going to be the picks, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for another video. I will see you soon for UFC Vegas 97 breakdown. And before that, you'll probably, actually, no, you'll see that one before the recap. But I'm going to be doing another fight companion for episode 4. So I'll be going live, commentating on the fights live. So make sure to come check it out. Come hang for a bit while we're watching the fights. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks again for watching.